The bullet grazed Thomas Brennan's shoulder, just as the sunset painted Santa Fe, New Mexico territory crimson. And he knew right then that saving the woman tied to that runaway wagon would change everything about his solitary existence. He spurred his horse forward, ignoring the burning pain in his arm as outlaws continued their chase behind him. The wagon careened wildly down the dusty road, its horses spooked beyond reason, and the dark-haired woman bound in the back screamed as the wheels hit another rut. Thomas had been riding into town for supplies when he heard the commotion, saw the three men pursuing the wagon with guns drawn, and instinct took over before common sense could intervene. His stallion, a massive bay named Ranger, closed the distance with powerful strides. Thomas pulled alongside the runaway team, reaching for the harness of the nearest horse. The leather burned his palm as he gripped it, using all his strength to pull the animal's head around. The wagon lurched dangerously, tilting on two wheels for a heart-stopping moment before crashing back down. The horses finally began to slow, foam flying from their mouths, their flanks heaving. Behind him, shots rang out. Thomas glanced back to see the three outlaws bearing down, their faces twisted with anger. He had maybe 30 seconds before they reached him. He leaped from Ranger onto the wagon seat, grabbing the reins and hauling back with everything he had. The horses finally stopped, stamping and snorting in a cloud of dust. "Hold on," he shouted to the woman, then jumped into the back of the wagon. She stared up at him with wide brown eyes, her face pale beneath a layer of road dust. Her wrists were bound with rough rope tied to the wagon bed. He pulled his knife and cut through the bindings in 2 quick strokes. "Can you ride?" he asked urgently. She nodded, rubbing her wrists. "Yes." "Then come on." He grabbed her hand and pulled her to the front of the wagon. The outlaws were less than 100 yards away now, spreading out to surround them. Thomas whistled sharply and Ranger trotted up beside the wagon. "Get on my horse. Ride straight for town. Do not stop. Do not look back." "What about you?" Her voice was hoarse but steady. "I will be right behind you." He practically lifted her onto Ranger's back. "Go now." She hesitated for just a moment, her eyes searching his face, then she dug her heels into the horse's flanks and took off. Thomas grabbed the wagon team's reins again, turning them sharply across the road to create a barrier. Then he dove behind the wagon bed, pulling his rifle from where it had fallen during the chase. The outlaws pulled up short, their horses dancing nervously. Thomas recognized the type. Rough men who made their living preying on travelers along the Santa Fe Trail. The leader, a heavy-set man with a scar bisecting his left eyebrow, glared at him. "That woman is ours," the man called out. "We paid good money for her." Thomas's blood ran cold, but his voice stayed calm. "A person cannot be bought. Turn around and ride away. You know who you are messing with, cowboy." "I know exactly what I am dealing with," Thomas replied. "Men who tie up defenseless women. Now back off before this gets uglier." The scarred man spat into the dust. "You are alone out here, 3 against 1. You do the math." Thomas sighted down his rifle barrel. "I do not miss. So the question is, which one of you wants to be first?" For a long moment, nobody moved. Thomas could feel sweat trickling down his back despite the cooling evening air. His shoulder throbbed where the bullet had grazed him, warm blood soaking his shirt. But his hands remained steady on the rifle. Finally, the scarred man cursed and yanked his horse around. "This is not over," he snarled, but he rode off, his companions following. Thomas waited until they disappeared over a rise before allowing himself to exhale. His hands started shaking then, the aftermath of fear and adrenaline. He climbed down from the wagon, his legs unsteady. The sun had nearly set now, painting the desert landscape in shades of purple and gold. He needed to get to town, find that woman, make sure she was safe. He also needed to get his shoulder looked at before infection set in. Using the wagon horses as a lead, he walked toward Santa Fe. It took nearly an hour to reach the town's outskirts, by which time full darkness had fallen and his shoulder hurt like the devil. The main street was lit with lanterns, and he could hear piano music drifting from the saloon. He headed straight for the marshal's office. Marshal Pete Henderson looked up from his desk as Thomas entered. "Thomas Brennan, have not seen you in weeks. What brings you to town?" Then his eyes widened as he took in the blood-soaked shirt. "Hell, what happened to you? Long story. Is the woman here?" Dark hair, brown eyes, was riding my horse. The one who came tearing into town like the devil was chasing her. Doc Patterson has her over at his place. She was pretty shaken up but did not seem hurt. Your horse is at the livery. Henderson stood up, coming around the desk. "Let me see that shoulder." Thomas waved him off. "In a minute. 3 men were chasing her, tried to claim they had bought her. I ran them off, but they might come back." Henderson's expression hardened. "Bought her? You mean slavers?" "That would be my guess." Thomas leaned against the wall, suddenly exhausted. The room swam slightly and he blinked hard to clear his vision. "All right, sit down before you fall down. I will get Doc Patterson over here." Henderson guided Thomas to a chair. "And I will send some deputies to patrol. If those men come into town, we will be ready." Dr. Patterson arrived within minutes, a small man with wire-rimmed spectacles and gentle hands. He cut away Thomas's shirt and examined the wound. "You are lucky. The bullet just barely caught you. Clean it up, bandage it properly, and you will be fine. Might be sore for a week or 2. As the doctor worked, cleaning the wound with sharp-smelling antiseptic that made Thomas grit his teeth, the door opened. The woman from the wagon stepped inside, and Thomas saw her clearly for the first time. She was perhaps 25, with dark brown hair that fell in waves past her shoulders and intelligent eyes that took in everything. She was beautiful, but more than that. She carried herself with a quiet strength that immediately caught his attention. "I heard you were hurt," she said, her voice soft but clear. "I wanted to make sure you were all right." "Just a scratch," Thomas managed, though the doctor's ministrations suggested otherwise. She moved closer, watching as Dr. Patterson wrapped clean bandages around his shoulder. "You saved my life. Those men would have killed me eventually. Or worse," Thomas said grimly. She flinched but did not look away. "I am Beatrice Reynolds. My friends call me B. Thomas Brennan. Most people just call me Thomas." He studied her face, seeing the exhaustion and fear beneath her composed exterior. "How did you end up with those men?" Beatrice glanced at Marshal Henderson, who nodded encouragingly. She took a deep breath. "I was traveling from St. Louis to California with a wagon train. My father died 6 months ago and left me some money. I thought I would start fresh somewhere new. But 3 days ago, those men attacked our camp at night. They killed the wagon master and 2 other men, scattered everyone else. They took me because—" She paused, her jaw tightening. "Because they said they could sell me to a brothel in Mexico." Thomas felt rage burn through him, hot and fierce. "Did they hurt you?" "They tied me up and threw me in that wagon, but they did not have time for much else before you came along." She met his eyes directly. "You saved me from a fate worse than death, Thomas Brennan. I owe you everything." "You do not owe me anything," he said quietly. "Any decent man would have done the same. But you are the one who actually did it." She reached out hesitantly, then gently touched his good shoulder. "Thank you." Dr. Patterson finished with the bandages and stood up. "All done. Take it easy for a few days, no heavy lifting. Come see me if there is any sign of infection." Marshal Henderson cleared his throat. "Miss Reynolds, we will need to take a full statement tomorrow. Tonight, I have arranged for you to stay at the boarding house." Mrs. Chen runs a respectable place and you will be safe there." Beatrice nodded gratefully. "Thank you, Marshal. I appreciate your kindness." As everyone prepared to leave, Thomas found himself reluctant to let Beatrice out of his sight. Those three men were still out there somewhere, and they did not seem like the type to give up easily. "Marshal, I would like to escort Miss Reynolds to the boarding house." Henderson looked at him knowingly. "I think that is a fine idea. I will have a deputy posted outside tonight as well." The boarding house was just 2 streets away, but Thomas felt the weight of watching eyes as they walked. Beatrice stayed close beside him, her arms wrapped around herself despite the warm evening air. When they reached the door, she turned to face him. "Where do you live, Thomas?" "I have a homestead about 10 miles north of here. Small place, just me and Ranger." "You live alone?" He nodded. "For the past 7 years. After my parents died, I left Texas and came out here. Wanted to start fresh, make my own way. That must be lonely." The simple observation cut deeper than he expected. "I suppose it is. I got used to it, though." Beatrice studied him in the lamplight. "Will you come by tomorrow, after I talk to the marshal, if you want me to?" "I do." She smiled then, a real smile that transformed her face. "You are the first kind person I have met in a long time, Thomas Brennan. I do not want to lose track of you." He found himself smiling back, something he had not done much of lately. "I will be here. Get some rest, Beatrice." "B," she corrected gently. "Please call me B." "B." The name felt right on his tongue. "Sleep well." He waited until she was safely inside before walking to the livery to check on Ranger. The big bay whickered in greeting, and Thomas spent some time brushing him down and making sure he had feed and water. As he worked, his mind kept returning to B. There was something about her, beyond her obvious beauty. A resilience, a determination that spoke of inner strength. She had been through hell but had not broken. Thomas found a room at the same boarding house, though he slept fitfully, his shoulder aching and his mind churning with thoughts. When dawn finally came, he rose and washed up, then went downstairs for breakfast. Bee was already there, sitting at a table by the window with a cup of coffee. She waved him over. "Good morning," she said. "You look like you did not sleep much. I could say the same about you." There were dark circles under her eyes, but she had changed into a fresh dress, borrowed from somewhere, and her hair was neatly braided. They ate breakfast together, making small talk about nothing important. Thomas found himself relaxing in her presence, the easy conversation a balm to his usually solitary existence. After eating, they walked together to the marshal's office, where Bee gave her full statement. Marshal Henderson wrote everything down carefully, his expression growing grimmer as the story unfolded. "I have sent telegrams to the surrounding towns, warning them about these men," Henderson said when Bee finished. "With any luck, we will have them in custody soon." "With any luck, they will decide New Mexico territory is too hot for them and move on," Thomas countered. "But I do not trust luck where these types are concerned." Henderson nodded. "Which is why I am keeping deputies on patrol." "Miss Reynolds, you are welcome to stay in Santa Fe as long as you need. We take care of our own here." Bee smiled gratefully, but Thomas could see the worry in her eyes. After they left the marshal's office, he suggested a walk. They strolled through the town, Bee taking in the adobe buildings and the mix of cultures that made Santa Fe unique. Spanish, Anglo, and native influences blended together here, creating something distinct and vibrant. "It is beautiful," Bee said, watching a group of women in colorful shawls walking past. "Different from St. Louis, but beautiful." "Did you have family back in St. Louis?" Thomas asked. "Just my father, and he is gone now. I have an aunt in California, which is why I was heading there." "But honestly," she paused, looking up at the brilliant blue sky, I think I just wanted to see what else was out there. I spent my whole life in one city, working as a seamstress, doing the same thing every day. When Father died, I realized I did not want that life anymore. Thomas understood that feeling all too well. That is why I left Texas. My parents had a small ranch, and after they passed from fever, everyone expected me to just keep running it the same way. But I wanted something of my own, something I built with my own hands. And did you build something of your own, working on it? He said. The homestead is not much yet, just a cabin and some land, but it is mine. They spent the rest of the morning together, and Thomas found himself telling Bea things he had not spoken about in years. About his parents, about his dreams for his land, about the isolation that sometimes threatened to swallow him whole. She listened with genuine interest, asking questions, sharing her own stories in return. By the time the sun reached its peak, Thomas felt like he had known her for years instead of hours. Over the next week, they fell into a pattern. Thomas stayed in town, officially to make sure the outlaws did not return, but really because he could not bring himself to leave Bea. They took meals together, walked through the markets, talked for hours about everything and nothing. Thomas had never connected with someone so easily, so completely. Bea was intelligent and funny, with a sharp wit that kept him on his toes. But she was also kind, stopping to help an elderly woman carry her packages, playing with children in the plaza. One evening, as they sat on a bench watching the sunset paint the Sangre de Cristo Mountains in shades of gold and red, Bea asked, "What will you do when you go back to your homestead?" The question made Thomas's chest tighten. He had been avoiding thinking about leaving, about the end of this strange, wonderful interlude. "Same as always, I suppose. Work the land, tend my animals, fix up the cabin. Will you be lonely?" He looked at her, seeing his own feelings reflected in her eyes. "More than before, I think. I have been thinking," Bea said slowly, "about what I should do next. Part of me still wants to go to California to see my aunt and the ocean, but another part of me wants to stay here. This place feels like it could be home in a way St. Louis never did." Thomas's heart began to beat faster. "What would you do here? For work, I mean." "I am good with a needle. I thought I might set up as a seamstress. Santa Fe is growing, and there is always need for someone who can make and mend clothes." She turned to face him fully. "What do you think? Is that a foolish idea?" "I think you could do anything you set your mind to," Thomas said honestly. "And I think Santa Fe would be lucky to have you." "Would you be happy if I stayed?" The directness of the question caught him off guard, but he did not hesitate. "Yes, very happy." Bea smiled, that radiant smile that made his world brighter. "Then I will stay, at least for a while, to see how things go." Thomas wanted to kiss her then, wanted to pull her into his arms and never let go. But they were in public, and besides, it seemed too fast, too soon. So instead he took her hand, threading his fingers through hers, and they sat together watching the sun disappear behind the mountains. 2 weeks after the incident with the wagon, Marshal Henderson received word that the 3 outlaws had been caught trying to rob a stagecoach near Albuquerque. They were in custody, awaiting trial. The news lifted a weight from Thomas's shoulders, but it also meant he had no more excuse to linger in town. His homestead needed attention, and his savings were running low from the cost of the boarding house. He told Bea over dinner that evening, "I need to go back tomorrow. The stock needs tending, and I have repairs that cannot wait any longer." Bea nodded, though disappointment flickered across her face. "I understand. You have a life to get back to." "Come with me," Thomas blurted out before he could stop himself. "Just for a visit, I mean. See the place, see if you like it out there. I will bring you back to town whenever you want." She studied him for a long moment. "You want me to see your homestead?" "I want you to see what I am building. I want your opinion on it." He took a breath. and I am not ready to say goodbye yet." "Neither am I," she admitted quietly. "All right, I will come for a visit." They left at dawn the next morning, Ranger carrying their supplies while Bee rode a gentle mare Thomas had purchased for her. The ride north took them through terrain that shifted from high desert to rolling grassland dotted with juniper and piñon. Thomas pointed out landmarks, telling stories about his various adventures in the territory. Bee listened and laughed and asked questions, her enthusiasm infectious. When they finally topped the rise that overlooked his property, Thomas stopped to let her take it in. The cabin sat in a small valley, backed by red rock cliffs and fronted by a creek that ran year-round. It was not much: rough wooden walls, a stone chimney, a small barn and corral. But the land itself was beautiful, wild and open with spectacular views in every direction. "Thomas," Bee breathed, "this is gorgeous." Pride swelled in his chest. "You really think so? It is like something from a dream." She urged her horse forward, eager to see more. The cabin was dusty from disuse, but the structure was sound. Thomas had built it himself over 2 summers, learning carpentry from trial and error. One large room served as kitchen, dining area, and living space, with a ladder leading to a sleeping loft. A fireplace dominated one wall, and windows on 3 sides let in plenty of light. "It is not fancy," Thomas said, suddenly seeing the place through Bee's eyes and finding it wanting. "Pretty basic, actually." "It is wonderful," Bee countered. She walked around the room, running her hands over the furniture he had built. "You made all this yourself, mostly. The stove I bought in town and some of the tools, but the rest, yes. You are very talented." She climbed the ladder to peek at the loft, then came back down. "It feels solid. Safe." They spent the afternoon cleaning and settling in. Thomas showed Bee how to work the pump for water where he kept supplies, how to manage the stove. She caught on quickly, moving through the space with growing confidence. For dinner they cooked together, falling into an easy rhythm that felt natural and right. After eating, they sat outside on the porch Thomas had built, watching stars appear in the darkening sky. The air was cool and clean, scented with sage and juniper. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called. "I have never seen so many stars," Bee said softly. "In the city, you only see a handful, but here, it is like someone spilled diamonds across black velvet." "It is one of my favorite things about living out here," Thomas admitted. "That and the quiet. Sometimes I sit out here for hours, just listening." "Do not you get lonely?" "I did before," he said carefully. "But right now, with you here, I cannot imagine being happier." Bee turned to look at him. In the starlight, her face was luminous. "Thomas, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me." His heart began to pound. "All right. When you look at me, what do you see? Do you see the woman you rescued, someone you feel responsible for, or do you see more than that?" Thomas took a moment to consider his answer, wanting to get it right. "When I first saw you, yes, I saw someone who needed help, but that changed within hours. Now when I look at you, I see someone remarkable, someone strong and kind and brave. Someone who makes me laugh and makes me think and makes me want to be better than I am. Someone I am falling in love with, if I am being completely honest." Bee's eyes widened. "You are falling in love with me." "Have been since about the 2nd day," Thomas admitted. "I know it is fast and maybe it does not make sense, but it is the truth." "I am falling in love with you too," Bee whispered. "And you are right, it does not make sense. We have barely known each other 3 weeks, but it feels real, Thomas. It feels more real than anything else in my life." Thomas reached for her hand, holding it gently. "I do not want you to feel pressured. You have been through something traumatic, and maybe what you are feeling is just gratitude or relief or—" "Stop," Bee interrupted firmly. "I know the difference between gratitude and love. This is love." It scares me a little how much I feel for you, but it is love." He kissed her then, finally, a soft press of lips that sent warmth flooding through his entire body. Bea kissed him back, her free hand coming up to cup his cheek. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing hard. "Stay," Thomas said. "Not just for a visit, stay here with me." "Thomas, I cannot just move in with you. People would talk, and besides, we barely know each other, and then marry me." Bea stared at him. "What, marry me?" Thomas repeated. He knew he should probably be terrified, should second-guess himself, but he felt completely certain. "I know it is fast. I know it is crazy. But I love you, Bea. I want to build a life with you. I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep beside you every night. I want to make this place into a real home, not just a cabin in the wilderness. I want children and laughter and a future with you." Tears spilled down Bea's cheeks. "Thomas, are you sure? You barely know me. What if I am terrible to live with? What if I snore or burn every meal or hate the isolation?" "Then we will figure it out together," he said simply. "I am not promising perfection, Bea. I am promising to try every single day to be the man you deserve, to build something good with you, to love you through whatever comes." "I am scared," she admitted. "I am terrified I will disappoint you, or that this feeling will fade, or that I am making a huge mistake." "Me too," Thomas said, "but I would rather take this leap with you than play it safe alone." Bea laughed through her tears. "That is either the most romantic or the most foolish thing anyone has ever said to me. Can it be both?" "Yes." She kissed him again, longer this time. When she pulled back, she was smiling. "Yes, Thomas Brennan, I will marry you. God help us both, but yes." They held each other under the stars, and Thomas felt something fundamental shift inside him. He had been alone for so long, had convinced himself that solitude was what he wanted. But Bea had shown him the difference between being alone and being lonely. With her, he felt complete in a way he never had before. The next few weeks passed in a blur of planning and preparation. They rode back to Santa Fe together to speak with the priest at the mission church. Father Mendoza was a kindly man who raised his eyebrows at their short courtship, but agreed to marry them after seeing how they looked at each other. "Love is a gift from God," he said. "When it is real, you do not need years to recognize it. You two have found something special. Do not waste time questioning it." Bea found fabric in the market and spent her evenings sewing a wedding dress while Thomas worked on expanding the cabin. He wanted to give her a real home, not just a bachelor's rough shelter. He added a second room that could serve as a sewing space for her work, reinforced the porch, and built a larger kitchen area. Mrs. Chen from the boarding house and several other townswomen took Bea under their wings, offering advice and help with wedding preparations. Marshall Henderson clapped Thomas on the shoulder one afternoon. "You are doing right by her, Brennan. That girl has been through hell, and you are giving her a reason to believe in good things again." "She has given me the same," Thomas replied. "I was just going through the motions before her. Now I feel alive again." The wedding took place on a warm September morning, 6 weeks after Thomas had first seen Bea on that runaway wagon. The small church was packed with well-wishers, proof of how quickly both of them had been accepted into the community. Bea walked down the aisle in a simple but elegant blue dress she had made herself, and Thomas thought she was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. They spoke their vows in strong, clear voices, promising to love and honor each other through whatever life brought. When Father Mendoza pronounced them husband and wife, Thomas kissed Bea with all the love and promise he felt, and the church erupted in cheers. The celebration afterward lasted well into the evening, with music and dancing and more food than Thomas had seen in years. But eventually they slipped away, eager to begin their life together. They rode back to the homestead under a full moon, Bee pressed close against Thomas's back, her arms wrapped around his waist. The cabin looked different when they arrived. Bee had added curtains to the windows on her last visit, and flowers from the market bloomed in a jar on the table. It looked like a home now, not just a shelter. Thomas carried Bee over the threshold, making her laugh. "I am not sure that tradition applies when you have already been here before." "It applies when you are my wife," he said firmly, setting her down and pulling her close. "This is our home now, Bee, yours and mine together." She kissed him deeply. "Our home," she agreed. "I like the sound of that." That night, they made love for the first time, exploring each other with tenderness and growing passion. Thomas had been with women before, brief encounters in towns that meant nothing beyond temporary comfort. But this was different. This was Bee, his wife, his love. Every touch meant something. Every kiss was a promise. When she cried out his name and arched against him, he felt complete in a way he had never imagined possible. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the loft, moonlight streaming through the small window. Bee traced patterns on his chest, her touch light and gentle. "Are you happy?" Thomas asked quietly. "Happier than I have ever been," she replied. "Are you?" "More than I can possibly say." He kissed the top of her head. "Thank you for taking a chance on me, Bee. Thank you for building something worth taking a chance on." They fell into married life with surprising ease. Bee proved to be a quick learner, mastering the skills needed for homestead living with determination and good humor. She learned to milk the cows Thomas purchased, to tend the vegetable garden she planted, to manage the chickens that clucked around the yard. Thomas built her a proper sewing area in the new room, and she began taking commissions from townswomen, her reputation for fine needlework spreading quickly. The homestead began to prosper under their combined efforts. Thomas expanded the herd, adding cattle and sheep. He built a larger barn and improved the irrigation from the creek. Bee contributed her earnings from sewing, and together they saved for improvements. But more than the material success, the place felt alive now. Bee's laughter filled the cabin, her singing as she worked brightened even the hardest days. Her presence transformed everything. They rode into Santa Fe together once a week for supplies and to deliver Bee's finished sewing. The townspeople greeted them warmly, asking after their health, sharing news and gossip. Thomas watched Bee bloom in these social interactions, her natural friendliness winning hearts. She was popular with everyone from the highest society ladies to the poorest laborers, treating everyone with the same genuine kindness. One afternoon in late autumn, as they loaded supplies into their wagon, Marshal Henderson hurried over. "Thomas, Bee, glad I caught you. Got some news about those outlaws who attacked your wagon train, Bee." "What about them?" Bee tensed slightly and Thomas moved closer, a silent support. "They were tried last week in Albuquerque. All three got 20 years hard labor. They will not be bothering anyone for a long time." Relief flooded Bee's face. "Thank you for telling us, Marshal." After Henderson left, Thomas pulled Bee into his arms, not caring who saw. "It is really over now. You are safe." "I know," she said, her voice muffled against his chest. "I have felt safe with you from the beginning. But knowing they are locked away, it helps. It is really over." As winter approached, they prepared the homestead for the cold months ahead. Thomas chopped wood until they had massive stacks under cover. Bee preserved vegetables from the garden and made warm quilts for their bed. They reinforced the barn and cabin against wind and snow. When the first storm hit in late November, they were ready. Those winter months were peaceful and intimate. Snowdrifts sometimes kept them isolated for days at a time, but neither minded. They read together by the fireplace, Thomas working his way through the books Bee had brought from St. Louis. They played cards and told stories and made love in the warm cocoon of their loft while winter raged outside. Bea taught Thomas fancier cooking than his bachelor efforts, and he taught her to shoot a rifle, just in case. "I hope I never have to use this," Bea said, practicing her aim on a target Thomas set up behind the barn. "Me too. But it makes me feel better knowing you can protect yourself if anything happens when I am not here." Christmas was simple but perfect. Thomas carved a small nativity set for Bea, working on it secretly in the barn. She sewed him a beautiful shirt with delicate embroidery at the collar and cuffs. They roasted a chicken and made cinnamon-scented pastries, then spent the evening counting their blessings. "A year ago, I could never have imagined this," Bea said, nestled against Thomas on their bed. "I thought I would be in California by now, trying to start over alone. Instead, I am here with you, happier than I knew was possible." "A year ago, I was the loneliest man in New Mexico," Thomas replied. "Now I have everything I ever wanted and some things I did not even know I needed." In January, Bea began feeling unwell in the mornings. At first she thought it was something she ate, but when the nausea persisted for 2 weeks, understanding dawned. Dr. Patterson confirmed it on their next trip to town. Bea was expecting a baby. Thomas felt like someone had knocked the air from his lungs. "A baby. We are having a baby. Due in late July or early August," the doctor said, smiling at Thomas's stunned expression. "Congratulations, you two. Any questions?" Bea had plenty of questions, and the doctor answered them patiently while Thomas sat in a daze. A baby. He was going to be a father. The reality slowly sank in, bringing with it a wave of joy so intense it was almost painful. On the ride home, he could barely contain himself. "We need to add another room onto the cabin. The baby will need space. And we should get a cradle. I can build one. Do you think it will be a boy or a girl?" "Either is fine, of course, but I am curious. Do you feel all right? Should you be riding? Maybe we should have stayed in town." Bea laughed. Thomas breathed. "I am fine. Women have been having babies since the beginning of time. We have months to prepare. I want everything to be perfect for you and the baby." She reached over to squeeze his hand. "It already is perfect because we are together." Thomas threw himself into preparing for the baby with characteristic intensity. He built a nursery addition onto the cabin, complete with large windows for light and air. He made a beautiful cradle from cherry wood, carving animals into the headboard. He reinforced the fences and made sure every possible danger was secured or eliminated. Bea watched his efforts with amusement and love, occasionally reining in his more extreme ideas. As spring arrived and Bea's belly grew round with their child, they talked about the future. Thomas wanted to expand the ranch, maybe hire a hand or two to help with the growing workload. Bea wanted to scale back her sewing to focus on motherhood, but not give it up entirely. They made plans and dreamed together, their excitement building as summer approached. But beneath Thomas's joy was a thread of fear he tried to hide. His own mother had died bringing him into the world. His father had never spoken much about it, but Thomas knew childbirth was dangerous. The thought of losing Bea terrified him in a way nothing else ever had. One night in early June, Bea caught him standing by the window, staring out into the darkness. "Thomas, what is wrong?" He tried to shake it off. "Nothing, just thinking." She came to stand beside him, taking his hand. "You are scared about the birth." "How did you know?" "Because I am scared too," she admitted. "But Thomas, I am healthy and strong. Dr. Patterson says everything looks good. I will be fine." "My mother died having me," he blurted out. "My father told me once, right before he passed. He said she hemorrhaged and there was nothing anyone could do." Bea pulled him into her arms. "Oh, Thomas, I am so sorry, but that is not going to happen to us. Medicine has improved and I have good care. You are not going to lose me. You cannot promise that. No, she agreed. But I promise I will fight with everything I have to stay with you and our baby. This family we have built, it is everything to me. I am not leaving it without a fight. Thomas held her tight, burying his face in her hair. I love you so much it terrifies me. I know. I feel the same way. In mid-July, they moved into Santa Fe temporarily, taking a room at Mrs. Chen's boarding house so they would be close to Dr. Patterson when the time came. Thomas paced the small room like a caged animal, driving Bea half mad with his restlessness. Thomas, please sit down, she said on their third day there. You are wearing a hole in the floor. Sorry, I just feel useless sitting around waiting. Then go for a walk. Visit Marshall Henderson. Do something other than stare at me like I might explode at any moment. He kissed her forehead. I will be back in an hour. Take 2 hours, she countered. I am going to take a nap. Thomas walked through town trying to calm his nerves. He ran into Father Mendoza outside the church, and the priest invited him in to talk. Thomas found himself pouring out his fears, the words tumbling over each other. It is normal to be afraid, Father Mendoza said when Thomas finally wound down. You are about to take on the responsibility of a child and you love your wife deeply. But fear is not from God, Thomas. Faith is. Have faith that all will be well. I am trying, Thomas said. But every time I think about what could go wrong. Stop thinking about what could go wrong and focus on what is going right. You have a healthy wife who loves you. You have a good home and a strong community. You have built something worth protecting. That baby is going to be born into love and security. That is what matters. The words helped, giving Thomas something to hold on to. He returned to the boarding house calmer, finding Bea awake and smiling. Better, she asked. Better, he confirmed. 3 days later, in the early hours of an August morning, Bea shook Thomas awake. It is time. Everything that followed was a blur. Dr. Patterson arrived quickly, along with Mrs. Chen and 2 other women experienced in helping with births. They shooed Thomas out of the room, leaving him to pace the hallway while Bea labored. The hours stretched endlessly. Thomas could hear Bea crying out, could hear the low murmurs of the women helping her, but he could not see what was happening. He prayed, bargained with God, and paced some more. Marshall Henderson arrived at some point, sitting with him in silent support. Finally, after what felt like an eternity but was actually about 10 hours, a new sound pierced the air, a baby's cry. Thomas froze, his heart pounding. Dr. Patterson emerged moments later, beaming. You have a son, Thomas, a healthy, loud son, and your wife is tired but doing well. You can come in now. Thomas practically ran into the room. Bea lay propped against pillows, exhausted but radiant, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in a soft blanket. When she saw Thomas, tears spilled down her cheeks. Come meet your son, she said softly. Thomas approached slowly, almost afraid to breathe. Bea pulled back the blanket to reveal a small, red face scrunched in sleepy displeasure. The baby had a shock of dark hair and tiny, perfect fingers that waved in the air. He is beautiful, Thomas whispered, just like his mother. Would you like to hold him? With shaking hands, Thomas took his son, cradling the impossibly light weight against his chest. The baby opened his eyes, dark blue and unfocused, and something in Thomas's chest cracked open. This was his son, his family, his future. What should we name him? Bea asked. They had discussed names but never settled on one. Now, looking down at his son, Thomas knew. Tobias, after my father. Tobias John Brennan. Tobias, Bea repeated. I love it. Hello, Tobias. Welcome to the world, little one. Dr. Patterson checked both mother and baby thoroughly before declaring them healthy and leaving them to rest. Thomas sat on the edge of the bed, unwilling to leave Bea's side, watching her sleep with Tobias tucked in the cradle beside them. He had never felt such overwhelming love, such fierce protectiveness. He would do anything for these two, give anything, be anything they needed. They stayed in town for another week, giving Bea time to recover and getting advice from experienced mothers. Then they returned to the homestead, now a family of 3. Thomas drove the wagon slowly, careful of every bump, while Bea held Tobias and laughed at his excessive caution. Life with a baby was both harder and better than Thomas had imagined. Tobias was a good baby, but he still needed constant care. Bea nursed him and changed him and rocked him when he cried. Thomas helped however he could, walking the floor with his son in the middle of the night, making faces to coax smiles, singing lullabies he half remembered from his own childhood. The homestead work continued, but Thomas hired a young man named Miguel from town to help with the heavy labor. This gave him more time to spend with Bea and Tobias, time he treasured. He loved watching Bea with their son, seeing the tender way she cared for him, hearing her sing as she nursed him by the window. As Tobias grew from a tiny newborn into a chubby, happy baby, Thomas marveled at every change. The first smile, the first laugh, the first time Tobias reached for him deliberately. Each milestone felt like a miracle. When Tobias started crawling at 6 months, Thomas' baby proofed everything, earning more amused laughter from Bea. "You cannot protect him from everything," she said gently. "He needs to explore to learn. I know, but I can make sure he does not crack his head open on the stove while he is learning." That winter was different from the previous one. Quieter in some ways with a baby to care for, but richer too. Thomas would never have believed he could be this happy, this content. Some mornings he woke up and had to convince himself it was all real, that he had not imagined this perfect life. One evening, as they sat by the fire with Tobias playing on a blanket between them, Bea said, "I was thinking about something today." "What is that?" "About how different my life would be if you had not saved me that day. I would be dead or worse. Instead, I have this." She gestured around the warm cabin. "I have you and Tobias and a home. Sometimes it feels too good to be true." Thomas reached across to take her hand. "I think about that too, about how lucky I was that I rode into Santa Fe that particular day at that particular time. 5 minutes earlier or later and I might have missed you completely. You think it was fate, that we were meant to find each other." "I do not know about fate," Thomas said slowly, "but I know I am grateful every single day that it happened. You and Tobias, you are my whole world, Bea. Everything I do, everything I build, it is for you too." "I love you, Thomas Brennan," she said softly, "more than I ever thought I could love anyone. I love you too, so much it still scares me sometimes." Tobias chose that moment to grab his own foot and topple over, making both parents laugh. Thomas scooped him up, blowing raspberries on his belly until the baby shrieked with laughter. Bea watched them with shining eyes, and Thomas thought, not for the first time, that he was the luckiest man alive. As Tobias grew into a toddler, the homestead continued to expand. Thomas bought more land, increasing their holdings until they had a proper ranch. The herd grew to nearly 100 head of cattle and twice as many sheep. Miguel proved invaluable, eventually becoming foreman when Thomas hired 2 more hands. The ranch was successful enough that they could have moved into town, built a fancier house, lived more comfortably. But neither wanted that. "This is where we started," Bea said when Thomas suggested the idea. "This is where we built our life together. I do not want to leave it." So instead they improved what they had. Thomas expanded the cabin again, adding a proper parlor and a second bedroom for Tobias. He built Bea a greenhouse so she could grow flowers and vegetables year-round. They replaced the rough furniture with pieces Thomas commissioned from a carpenter in town, making the interior as beautiful as the exterior location. Bea continued her sewing work, though more selectively now. She focused on special commissions, wedding dresses and christening gowns and other important pieces that let her creativity shine. Women came from as far away as Albuquerque for her work, and she could charge accordingly. But she never let the work consume her, always making time for Tobias and Thomas. When Tobias was 3, Bea discovered she was pregnant again. The news brought the same joy and fear as the first time, but Thomas was better prepared now. He knew what to expect, knew that Bea was strong, knew that their family would expand again. Their daughter was born on a spring morning in 1885, coming into the world much faster than her brother had. They named her Rosalina, after both grandmothers. She had Bea's delicate features and Thomas's dark coloring, and from the start she had a sunny disposition that won everyone over. Tobias was fascinated by his baby sister, insisting on helping with everything. He brought her toys, sang to her in his little boy voice, and got upset when she cried. Watching his children together made Thomas's heart expand even more, if that was possible. "We made this," he said to Bea one evening, watching Tobias carefully hand Rose a rattle. "We made this beautiful family." "We did," she agreed, leaning against his shoulder. "I cannot imagine my life any other way now." The years flowed by, marked by the rhythms of ranch life and family. Tobias grew tall and strong, spending his days helping Thomas with the animals and the land. Rose was quieter than her brother but equally determined, insisting on learning everything he learned. Bea taught them both to read using her precious books from St. Louis, and Thomas taught them to ride and rope and shoot. When Tobias was 7 and Rose was 4, a traveling teacher passed through offering to tutor children in the outlying areas. Thomas and Bea hired her immediately, converting part of Bea's sewing room into a classroom. Other ranch families heard about it and asked if their children could join, so suddenly they were running a small school. The teacher, Miss Sarah Calhoun, stayed with them during the week and returned to Santa Fe on weekends. The homestead, which had started as just Thomas and his lonely cabin, had become a gathering place, a community hub where neighbors came for help, advice, and companionship. Bea's natural warmth and Thomas's quiet reliability made them natural leaders, and they embraced the role. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Thomas surprised Bea by taking her back to Santa Fe for a weekend alone. Miguel and his wife watched the children, and Thomas and Bea stayed at the newly built Palace Hotel, the fanciest place in town. "This is too extravagant," Bea protested, though she was smiling. "You deserve extravagant," Thomas countered. "You have given me 10 years of love and joy and 2 beautiful children. The least I can do is treat you like a queen for a weekend." They attended the theater, ate at nice restaurants, and danced together for the first time in years. Thomas had never been a great dancer, but Bea did not care, laughing as he stepped on her toes and tried to remember the patterns. Later, in their hotel room, they made love with the freedom of knowing they would not be interrupted by small voices. Afterward, wrapped around each other in the fancy bed, Bea said, "You know what the best part of today was?" "What?" "Remembering what it was like when it was just us. I love our children more than life, but it is nice to remember that we were a couple before we were parents, that we still are, underneath everything else." Thomas kissed her deeply. "I fall in love with you more every single day, Bea Brennan. You are the best thing that ever happened to me." "Even better than Ranger," she teased. "Even better than Ranger, though do not tell him that." They returned home refreshed and reconnected, diving back into family life with renewed energy. The children were overjoyed to see them, both talking over each other to share everything that had happened in 2 days. As Tobias approached his teen years, he began to chafe against the isolation of the ranch. He wanted to see more, do more, meet other young people his age. Thomas understood the feeling better than the boy knew. "What do you think about sending him to school in Santa Fe?" Bea asked one night after Tobias had complained yet again about the lack of excitement. He could board with Mrs. Chen during the week, come home on weekends. The thought of his son leaving, even partially, made Thomas's chest tight, but he knew it was the right thing. He would get a better education there, and it might scratch that itch for adventure. They broached the subject with Tobias, who was initially thrilled, then worried. But who would help with the ranch work? And what about Rose? She would be lonely. "We will manage the ranch work," Thomas assured him, "and Rose will survive. You need to do what is best for you, son." So at 13, Tobias began attending the school in Santa Fe, returning home on weekends full of stories about his classes and his new friends. It was an adjustment for everyone, but they made it work. Rose blossomed in her brother's absence, coming out of his shadow and showing her own strength and personality. When Tobias was 15, he came home one weekend with a black eye and split knuckles. Thomas took one look and said, "Come on, let us take a walk." They walked out to the creek where Thomas had taught Tobias to fish years before. "Want to tell me about it?" "Some boys at school were saying things about Mother," Tobias said, anger tightening his voice. "About how she was kidnapped by slavers and maybe she had been a whore before that, and that is why the outlaws took her." Thomas felt old rage stir but kept his voice level. "And what did you do?" "I hit the one who said it." Then his friends jumped in. "I got some good licks in before the teachers broke it up." "Did you tell them the truth? About how your mother was simply traveling with a wagon train when she was attacked?" "I did." "They did not care. They just wanted to be cruel." Tobias looked at his father, vulnerability showing through the teenage bravado. "Father, was Mother really? Your mother was a seamstress in St. Louis, traveling to California to visit her aunt," Thomas interrupted firmly. "She was attacked by criminals who wanted to sell her. I was lucky enough to be in the right place to help. Everything else is lies made up by small-minded people who have nothing better to do than tear others down." "That is what I told them." "Good. Now, I am not going to say you should not have hit that boy, because if someone spoke about your mother that way to me, I would have done the same. But you need to understand that there will always be people who want to make themselves feel bigger by making others feel small. The best revenge is living well and not letting them get to you." "I know, but it is hard." "It is very hard," Thomas agreed. "But you have your mother's strength and I hope a little of mine. You will get through it." The incident blew over, and Tobias finished his schooling without further problems. When he graduated at 17, he announced he wanted to go to college in Denver to study agriculture. "I want to learn the modern methods," he explained. "I want to come back and make our ranch even better." Thomas was proud beyond words, and he and Bea scraped together the tuition. Watching his son ride away to Denver was one of the hardest things Thomas had ever done, but Bea held his hand and reminded him it was what they had worked for, to give their children opportunities. Rose, now 14, was furious at being left behind again, but Thomas had plans for her too. "How would you feel about learning veterinary medicine?" he asked. "I could arrange for you to study with Doc Patterson. He treats animals as well as people." Her face lit up. "Really? You would let me do that? Why not? You have always been good with the animals. Might as well make something of it." So Rose began an apprenticeship with Dr. Patterson, riding into town 3 times a week for lessons. She took to it naturally, her gentle touch and sharp mind making her a quick study. Dr. Patterson declared her the best student he had ever had, and began bringing her along on calls to outlying ranches. With both children pursuing their own paths, Thomas and Bea had time for each other again. They were in their 40s now, with threads of silver in their hair and lines on their faces. But Thomas still found Bea as beautiful as the day he met her, and she insisted he had only gotten more handsome with age. One evening, sitting on their porch watching the sunset as they had done 1,000 times before, Bea said, "Do you ever regret it, saving me that day? Your life would be simpler if you had just ridden past." Thomas looked at her in genuine confusion. "How could I possibly regret the best thing that ever happened to me? I brought complications, children, responsibilities, all the chaos of family life." "You brought joy," he corrected. "You brought love and laughter and purpose. Before you, I was just existing, Bea. You gave me a reason to live, to build, to hope. I would do it all again in a heartbeat." She smiled, that same radiant smile that had won his heart years ago. "Good answer. It is the truth." They sat in comfortable silence, hands clasped, watching the sky turn from gold to pink to deep purple. Thomas reflected on how much had changed since that desperate day when he had chased down a runaway wagon. He had been so alone then, so lost without realizing it. Now he had everything: a wife he adored, children he was proud of, a successful ranch, a place in the community. "Thank you," he said softly. "For what? For choosing me, for staying, for building this life with me." Bea squeezed his hand. "You built me a home, Thomas Brennan. Not just this physical place, though that is beautiful. You built me a home in your heart. How could I have chosen anything else?" Tobias returned from college 4 years later with a degree and a fiancée, a smart young woman named Catherine who shared his passion for ranching. They were married in the same church where Thomas and Bea had wed, and Thomas felt the circle of life continue. Rose finished her studies with Dr. Patterson and set up her own practice, treating animals throughout the territory. She eventually married a rancher from a neighboring property, a kind man who supported her unconventional career. As grandchildren started arriving, Thomas and Bea's home became even more lively. Tobias and Catherine had 3 children in quick succession, 2 boys and a girl. Rose and her husband had twin girls. The homestead rang with children's laughter again, and Thomas could not imagine anything better. On their 25th wedding anniversary, Thomas took Bea on a ride to a spot he had been preparing for weeks. It was a rise overlooking their entire property, with views stretching for miles in every direction. He had built a simple structure there, 4 posts supporting a roof with a bench underneath. "What is this?" Bea asked, charmed. "I wanted to build you something," Thomas said. "Something that represents what you have meant to me all these years." He handed her a small plaque he had commissioned. It read, "For Beatrice, who made a house a home and a life worth living. With love eternal, Thomas." Tears streamed down Bea's face. "Thomas, it is perfect." They sat together on the bench, looking out at everything they had built. The expanded cabin, now practically a manor house. The barns and outbuildings. The fields and pastures. The creek that had always run clear and cold. The children and grandchildren playing in the yard below. "You remember what I told you that first night at the homestead?" Thomas asked. "When I asked you to marry me." "You said a lot of things that night," Bea teased. "I said I wanted to build a real home with you, that I wanted children and laughter and a future." He gestured at the scene below them. "We did it, Bea. We built something beautiful." "We did," she agreed. "And you know what the best part is?" "What?" "We are not done yet. We have so many years ahead of us still. More grandchildren to spoil, more sunsets to watch, more memories to make." Thomas pulled her close, kissing her with all the love of 25 years together. "I love you, Beatrice Brennan, more now than ever." "I love you too, Thomas. My rescuer, my husband, my home." As the sun set over their land, painting everything in shades of gold, Thomas reflected on the strange path life had taken. A chance encounter, a moment of decision to help a stranger had given him everything. He had been so lonely before B, existing in isolation without realizing how much he was missing. Now, surrounded by family and love, he understood what richness really meant. It was not the successful ranch or the money in the bank, though those were nice. It was the woman beside him, still beautiful after all these years. It was the sound of grandchildren playing. It was the knowledge that he had built something that would last beyond his own lifetime. The years continued to pass, bringing changes and challenges. They lost friends to age and illness. The territory became a state. Modern conveniences slowly made their way even to their remote corner of New Mexico. But through it all, Thomas and Bee remained the constant, their love the foundation everything else was built on. When Thomas turned 60, Tobias threw a party that brought together what felt like half the state. Friends and neighbors, business associates and family, all gathered to celebrate. Speech after speech praised Thomas for his integrity, his fairness, his kindness. But when it was his turn to speak, Thomas kept it simple. "I am just a man who got lucky," he said, his arm around Bee's waist. "Lucky enough to be in the right place at the right time. Lucky enough to recognize love when I found it. Lucky enough to build a life with the best woman I ever met. Everything good in my life stems from that one moment of decision 27 years ago. So I guess the lesson is, when you see someone who needs help, help them. You never know what might come of it." The crowd laughed and applauded, but Bee leaned close and whispered, "It was not luck. It was fate. We were meant to find each other." "Maybe you are right," Thomas conceded. "Either way, I am grateful every single day." More grandchildren arrived over the years, until Thomas lost count of how many descendants he had. The ranch was divided among Tobias and his siblings, ensuring everyone had a place if they wanted it. Thomas and Bee slowly stepped back from the day-to-day operations, content to advise when asked and otherwise simply enjoy their later years. They took trips together, finally visiting California to see the ocean Bee had once dreamed of. They traveled to Denver to visit Tobias's old college. They even went back to St. Louis, so Bee could see her childhood home one last time. But they always came back to the homestead, to the place where their life together had truly begun. On their 40th anniversary, their children and grandchildren organized a massive celebration. A photographer came out from Santa Fe to take family portraits, and Thomas marveled at how his lonely cabin had turned into this. Generations of love and life. That evening, after everyone had gone home or to bed, Thomas and Bee walked out to the gazebo he had built for their 25th anniversary. The night was clear and cool, stars blazing overhead just as they had that first night they spent together. 40 years, Bee said wonderingly. "Where did the time go?" "Into every moment we shared," Thomas replied. "Into building this place, raising our family, loving each other. I would not trade a single day of it, not even the hard times. When we fought about money, or when Tobias went through that rebellious phase, or when Rose broke her arm falling from that tree, not even then. Those moments are part of our story too. They made us stronger." Bee leaned against him, fitting perfectly under his arm as she always had. "I was so scared that day you saved me. Scared of those men, scared of what would happen to me. And then you appeared like something from a story and everything changed." "I was scared too," Thomas admitted. "Scared I would not reach you in time. Scared those men would shoot me. Scared you would ride into town and I would never see you again." "Is that why you came to check on me that first night? Because you were scared I would disappear?" "Partly, but mostly because I already could not imagine not knowing you." They stood together in comfortable silence, two people who had shared a lifetime. Thomas thought about that scared, lonely man he had been at 28, convinced he was content with solitude. How wrong he had been. How much he would have missed if he had not followed his instinct that day. "Thank you," Bea said softly, echoing his words from years before. "For what? For building me a home, for giving me a family, for loving me so completely that I never doubted it for a single day." "That was easy," Thomas said. "Loving you has been the easiest thing I ever did." They watched the stars wheel slowly overhead, marking the passage of time as they had for millennia. Thomas knew they did not have forever, that mortality would catch up with them eventually. But in that moment, holding his wife under the stars they had watched together for 40 years, he felt blessed beyond measure. As they walked back to the house, Bea said, "You know what I think about sometimes?" "What is that?" "What would have happened if you had ridden past that day? If you had decided it was not your problem, that you did not want to get involved?" Thomas stopped walking, turning to face her. Even now, with lines around her eyes and silver in her hair, she took his breath away. "I could never have ridden past. Even if I had not fallen in love with you, even if we had never built this life together, I still would have helped. It is who I am." "I know. It is who you have always been. My hero." "No," he corrected gently. "Just a man who saw someone who needed help and had the ability to give it. The real blessing was not saving you, Bea. It was you choosing to stay to build this life with me. That was the gift." They continued to the house, to the home they had built together through love and hard work and unshakable commitment. The house was quiet now, everyone settled for the night. But tomorrow it would ring with life again. Children playing, adults talking, meals being prepared, a family going about their daily routines. Thomas and Bea climbed the stairs to their bedroom, the same loft Thomas had built nearly 40 years before, now expanded and improved but essentially unchanged. They prepared for bed with the comfortable familiarity of long marriage, then lay down together, Bea's head on Thomas's shoulder. "I love you," she murmured, half asleep already. "I love you too," he replied, "more than words can say." As Bea's breathing deepened into sleep, Thomas lay awake a while longer, counting his blessings. A wife who still made his heart race, children who had grown into good people, grandchildren who would carry on after they were gone, a ranch that would provide for generations, a community that respected and valued them, a life so rich and full that sometimes he could barely believe it was real, all because he had chosen to help a stranger one hot afternoon in August. All because he had seen a runaway wagon and decided it was his problem to solve. That single moment of decision had given him everything. As Thomas finally drifted toward sleep, his last conscious thought was gratitude. Gratitude for the chance encounter that had changed everything. Gratitude for the love that had sustained them through 4 decades. Gratitude for the home they had built together, not just the physical structure but the life they had created within it. He had told Bea on that first night at the homestead when he proposed that he wanted to build something good with her. And they had. They had built something beautiful and lasting, something that would endure long after they were gone. A legacy of love and family and home. The lonely cowboy had found his purpose the day he saved a woman from a runaway wagon. He had built her a home, given her his heart, and received more in return than he could ever have imagined. It was a story of courage and love, of taking chances and building something from nothing. It was their story, and Thomas would not have changed a single word of it. Outside, the stars continued their ancient dance across the night sky. Inside, 2 people who had found each other against all odds slept peacefully, secure in the knowledge that they had chosen right. That the life they had built together was exactly what they both needed. And in the morning, they would wake to do it all again. Another day of love, another day of family, another day of the beautiful life they had created together. The lonely cowboy was lonely no more, and would never be lonely again. He had found his home in Beatrice Reynolds, and she had found hers in him, and together they had built something that would last forever.